Private investigators of Reddit, what is the most bizarre task you've been assigned to? Someone wanted to know what their cat was up to when they were working. Paid me to tell it. I don't like wasting my time, but the work's not always busy as a private investigator. Turns out the cat just walks around the streets, licks itself and climbs trees. Finally, a question I can answer. Been a private investigator for going on a year now, and the strangest case I had was of a woman asking us to find out if her husband was cheating on her. She said there was something off in the house, as if feeling something, and she wanted to know what it was. So she suspected her husband of cheating. So I show up and install nanny cams in her house for the weekend upon her approval and where to place them. She works all weekend and this was the best route. Well, 3 days go by and I collect the footage and come to find out the husband was touching his 8-year-old stepdaughter. After seeing that, I rushed to the courthouse with a copy of the footage and got a court order for the police to go and get him. I'm a private investigator, among other things. I haven't had any bizarre tasks, though I have had some interesting situations, and I've performed surveillance on cheating spouses as well as factual workers' compensation and public liability matters. One matter which really made an impression on me was where a person had a fatal vehicle incident and a claim was made that it was a workplace injury. I don't know what on earth happened with this claim, but it was 5 years before the insurer gave it to me. There were some questions about it. The person making the claim alleged to be the worker's wife, though work colleagues did not know her, and also the incident was almost 200 kilometers from the workplace. When I spoke to former colleagues, a lot of them struggled to remember him. This really was so sad. It left a deep impression on me that what are we once we are dead, if we are not even memories. I did, however, learn he stayed at a caravan park during the working week. I called that place, but the owner said it had changed hands and he didn't know the guy. He didn't have any old records, and he didn't know where the former owner was. He did remember the former owner's name, however. I called everyone in the phone book for the state with that name. I finally got my man, and he remembered the deceased vividly, along with his wife and son. It was tremendous. I learned the guy would stay near the workplace during the week and travel back home to a remote town for weekends. I drove all the way to that town, but couldn't find the wife. She wasn't at any address I had, nor did she answer her phone. I got petrol and asked at the counter if they knew the family, and they said it might be so and so and directed me to a house. I went there, turned out to be the wife's parents. They called the daughter. She arrived and both mother and daughter had a big cry while showing me all their photographs of the guy. It was very moving, and I was so relieved to have real evidence the guy ever actually existed after how his co-workers were finding it hard to remember him. The story was very sad. He died on the way to work on a Monday morning. Normally he would travel to the caravan on a Friday night, but this particular weekend was Mother's Day. He stayed Sunday night and traveled Monday early in the morning, ran off the road and passed away. I was able to determine the lady was genuinely his wife, that he was on his way to the workplace, that it was his regular route to work, and so on. I supplied this to the insurer. I never, well, rarely ever, hear what happens to a matter, so I only hope it was finally settled. Not a pie here, but someone who was confronted by one and told it was the weirdest thing he's had to do. A roommate I had in college was a strange guy. This guy came from the other side of the country, I'm us. He went out at all hours of the night, never showed up for class, slept during the day, and drank more energy drinks than is healthy. His parents were worried about him, apparently, and hired a pie to trail him. Now, living in a college dorm in a part of campus where only freshmen live, makes an adult who isn't janitorial staff stick out like a sore thumb. So, I picked up fairly quickly that this guy was hanging around the dorms. Thought he was just cruising for some freshmen, and didn't bother him. A few weeks later, I was walking back from the dining hall, and he approached me. It was a public place, asking if we could talk somewhere private. I was weirded out, and told him we could talk right here. He told me he was a pie hired by my roommate's parents to trail him, because his parents were concerned, and he wanted to ask me about my roommate's storm habits. We then left to the coffee shop to talk about my roommate. My roommate apparently liked to go walk on the beach at night for stupid amounts of time, hang out at Steak and Shake playing game on his phone and Nintendo DS for hours on end, and cruise thrift shops for some reason. I told the guy that the dude just slept and didn't even have any personal effects in the room besides his clothes. The pie and I both realized that this kid pretty much had no direction or motivation in life, and his parents usually pushed him to do everything. He said that this kid's behavior was the most bizarre pattern of activity he's pretty much seen. To explain the kid's actions, college was the first alone time he's ever had, and he was savoring it doing whatever he wanted. I ended up feeling for the guy and reached out to him. He changed majors from engineering to a psychology degree because he wanted to learn how the mind worked, and he suddenly became super interested in college. Ended up being a cool guy once he realized he was not in his parents' grasp anymore. I have a story about this. My brother was a pie in the early 90s. He worked for a law firm. I was in my early 20s, and so he got me a gig as a process server. He was working a particularly nasty divorce case. Husband was a Jordanian national married to an American woman, one of several wives, who was over being the breadwinner in the family and wanted out. Also, she worked for NASA. He was tasked with going into their house, which was in her name. She wasn't living there, she was in an apartment until this was settled, and getting a briefcase with financial information in it. Since I was a process server, I had to go along in case someone was home for whatever reason. We went and waited down the road until everyone left and went in and got the briefcase. No big deal. We take it back to the attorney's office and he calls the lady and says he has it. She gives him the combination, he opens it and it was full of technical plans from Boeing for the Apache helicopter. Attorney says fuck, instantly shuts the briefcase, tells me and my brother to leave now, so we did. We never heard any more about that case at all, other than he contacted the FBI over it. Did surveillance on a nurse. She was supposedly so disabled that she couldn't work. They suspected she was working. Easiest surveillance I ever did. I arrived. She got in her car 10 minutes later. Followed her, with no complication, to a strip club, where she went in and began doing her thing. Club had a posted prohibition on video, so I had to go in and watch her dance so that I could testify that I saw her dancing when it went to court. Over the next few days I followed her to 3 other strip clubs and did the same. That month I turned in the sketchiest expense report of my life. Eventually it went before the WC board. When the judge asked why she was stripping, she just shrugged and said she made twice as much money than when she was nursing. Benefits got yanked. Insurance company was happy. But the company lawyer gave me the nickname Detective Tits, which, most regrettably, stuck and spread to all of the other lawyers I dealt with. Worst night of my life, man. Alright, here goes. After I got out of the Navy, I worked for one of the top pie firms in Houston. Because of my electronics background, I'd usually go along on the jobs where we were checking for bugs and hidden surveillance devices. We got a call from a client who was sure that his office was bugged because his client knew everything that he was doing before he did it. His office was a mobile trailer that was on his client's site. He was a subcontractor for a big oilfield construction company. We did a full electronic sweep and found nothing. This was back in the early 90s. Didn't have to worry about burst transmissions, etc. No devices implanted in his phones. He insisted on a full physical sweep of the trailer, inside and out. So we crawled under the trailer and got a ladder and inspected the roof. Still nothing. We are getting ready to leave and he says, "Look, I'm not crazy. Pick up the phone, press 9 to get an outside line, and you'll start hearing all sorts of clicky sounds." Turns out his office phones were routed through the corporate PBX of his client. They didn't have to bug his office. They could just pick up an extension inside the main building and listen into whatever they wanted. We weren't even sure if it was illegal. We advised him to install a private phone line that he paid for if he wanted private conversations. We ended up billing him like $2,000 for that visit. Not a pie, but I met one. I was at my friend's house and he got a knock on the door. The dude was black, edit, Congolese to be specific. "Hello, sir, are you X? Yeah, Y?" Explains that he's a pie and that he'd like to talk in private. "Nah, I'm fine just talking here at the door." Shows him a picture. "Do you know this man? His name is Y." "Yeah, that's my great uncle. He's vacationing in the Congo right now." "Why?" I'm sorry sir, but your great uncle died of hepatitis. Elaborates how his great uncle, a priest, banged some hooker and got infected and died. I was in the living room eating pizza the whole time, pretending to be watching TV. A private investigator came into the bar I was bartending at years ago and showed me 2 pictures. One of a girl in her early 20s that her family was trying to find, the other of a guy in his late 20s that they suspected she had run away with. The guy in the picture had a charge on his debit card from my bar a week earlier, so the investigator came in hoping that I would remember if the girl was with him that night. I did not recognize the girl at all, but I remembered the guy. He had come in with 2 other guys around his age. They got pretty drunk, but all they really did was shoot pool. They didn't cause any problems and they actually tipped me really well. I never heard anything else about the girl, so I don't know if the family eventually found her or if she disappeared for good. I just now remembered that her first name was Katie. I can't remember the guy's name though. It was one of my last cases that I worked on. It was for a child custody / paternity case. This case was the one that made me rethink what I was doing, and I got very disturbed by what I was asked to do. This is the case that made me stop being a pie. Our client was denying that the child in question was actually his and was fighting the child support case. He believed that the mother of the child was a serial adulterer. So much so that he spent thousands on the case for us to make sure there was evidence to support his claim. The icing on the shit cake was when my case manager told me that client wanted video evidence that the child did not look like him. The client told us that we had to record the child at play. So here I am, beside a playground, in a completely limo-tinted car, videotaping a 9-year-old. I couldn't have felt worse about my life choices. To this day I have never felt like such a creep before. I hated that case and the case manager. 2 weeks later I handed in my resignation. Doing a standard pre-employment background check on a guy, found that he was found guilty in a sexual harassment case. Didn't have the case details at that point and the guy denied it was him. Pulled more details from the case and confirmed that it was definitely him and that he was convicted of indecent exposure. The guy finally admitted it was him, but claimed it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Pulled the court transcripts. Turns out he flashed a 12-year-old on the beach and said ever seen one of these before. He did not get the job. A colleague of mine was a pie. He said the majority of his casework isn't telling people, but serving court notices. He told me of a variety of really slimy ways he'd serve people, including disguises, high-pressure tactics and weird social engineering. He's out of it now because he'd had too many close calls. Serving divorce papers or notices of being sued where you have no idea of the state of mind of the person you're serving to could get interesting to say the least. One of my clients called into the office wanting to find the culprit behind, get this, undiscriminate fecal matter disposal in her porch. So I did the usual routine. Ask questions about seeing anything at night or any other suspicious activity. A couple weeks passed, and we still could find the guy behind all of this, until one day I hid by the bushes, and I shit you the guy was just sitting in a tree. So I make my way up the tree, jump on him, and snap his neck. Then I bringed his corpse to my client. She said to me, "Mittens, why did you do that?" I was very confused by her reaction, but I got to eat tuna, so job well done in my book. Also, I'm a cat. Some guy assigned me to investigate another private investigator while simultaneously telling that private investigator to investigate me. Absolutely bizarre.